Up here, the air tastes like rust and old exhaust. But beneath Elias's fingernails, there is something the rest of this gray city has forgotten. The wind whistles through the jagged skyline of a dying town, whipping against the plastic sheeting of a makeshift greenhouse. They call this place a concrete graveyard, a skeletal remain of a town that once thrived on the sweat of honest labor. Now it is just a collection of boarded windows and hollowed-out spirits. But on the roof of a crumbling tenement, Elias is doing the impossible. He is farming. To the neighbors below, he's just a boy playing in the dirt. To the suits in the glass towers, he is a nuisance, a stain on the urban renewal they keep promising. But the dirt doesn't lie, and the seeds do not care about profit margins. Stick around and subscribe to Beyond the Fields as we watch a boy turn gravel into gold. Elias comes from a long line of men who knew the weight of a heavy harvest, but he also inherited the bitterness of the day the machines stopped and the bank came calling. His grandfather, Silas, used to walk fields that stretched toward the horizon, a sea of black earth that seemed like it would feed the world forever. But the world changed. The climate grew fickle, and the corporate giants grew greedy. They offered loans that looked like lifelines, but felt like nooses. When the rains didn't come for 3 seasons straight, the interest rates spiked like a fever. Elias remembers the day the men in the dark suits stood on the porch, their shoes polished to a shine that didn't belong in the mud. They took the tractors first. Then they took the silos. Finally, they took the ground itself. His father died with the smell of diesel and disappointment in his lungs, leaving Elias with nothing but a box of heirloom seeds and a determination that the land, even if it was just a few inches of soil hauled up 5 flights of stairs, would not be taken from him again. This town, Oak Haven, was once the heart of the valley, a place where families were built on the strength of the soil. Now it is a shell. The factories are silent, and the main street is a row of teeth missing from a smile. Most people Elias's age left long ago, chasing the neon lights of the coast. But Elias stayed. He saw something in the gray that others missed. He started small, carrying buckets of compost and river mud up the rusted fire escape of his apartment building. People laughed. They leaned out of their cracked windows, smoking cheap cigarettes, and watched him labor. They asked him why he bothered. They told him the sun was too harsh, the air too poisoned, and the space too small. But Elias knew that life finds a way. He remembered his grandfather's voice, a low rumble like an approaching storm, telling him that a man who can grow his own food can never truly be a slave. He spent his nights reading by candlelight, studying the old ways of intensive planting and the new ways of urban survival. He built raised beds out of discarded pallets and lined them with heavy plastic he salvaged from construction sites. He didn't have a tractor, so he used a hand trowel until his palms were a map of blisters and calluses. He didn't have a river, so he rigged up a system of gutters to catch every precious drop of the erratic rain. His mother worried, her eyes heavy with the memory of the farm they lost, but she saw the fire in her son's eyes. It was a fire the bank couldn't seize and the wind couldn't blow out. He told her that he wasn't just growing tomatoes and kale. He was growing a rebellion. He was proving that the soul of the land doesn't stay behind a fence. It lives in the hands of the person willing to tend it. Every day, while the rest of the town sank further into the mire of poverty and apathy, Elias climbed toward the sky. He was a son of the soil in a world of stone, and he was ready to make his stand. He knew the history of his bloodline was written in the dirt, and he intended to write the next chapter, even if he had to do it on a roof. The struggle was constant. The wind up there could be brutal, threatening to tear his fragile seedlings from their beds. The heat reflected off the tar paper was enough to bake the roots. But Elias was patient. He learned to build windbreaks out of scavenged plywood. He learned to mulch with straw and shredded cardboard to keep the moisture where it belonged. He lived on the edge of survival, eating thin soup and day-old bread, putting every spare cent and every ounce of energy into his elevated acre. He was the guardian of the green in a desert of gray, and he knew that soon the seeds would have to speak for themselves. While Elias was sweating over his pallets, a man named Sterling Vance was looking down from the penthouse of the city's only skyscraper. Vance was the kind of man who viewed the world through the lens of a spreadsheet. To him, Oak Haven wasn't a community. It was a distressed asset. He was the architect of the New Vista project, a plan to tear down the very tenements where Elias lived to make room for luxury condos and high-end retail that no one in the town could actually afford. He wanted to erase the past and pave over the struggle. One afternoon, Vance decided to take a walking tour of the blight he intended to cure. He walked with a team of surveyors and city council members who nodded at his every word like hungry dogs. When they reached the street below Elias's building, Vance stopped and looked up. He saw the greenery spilling over the edge of the roof, a vibrant, defiant splash of life against the scorched brick. He sneered, the expression looking like a crack in a marble statue. He asked what that shantytown garden was doing on top of a prime redevelopment site. He called it an eyesore, a pathetic attempt at hobbyism that made the neighborhood look even more desperate. To Vance, Elias wasn't a farmer. He was a squatter, a glitch in the master plan. He made a note to expedite the demolition permits. He didn't see the complexity of the irrigation or the health of the leaves. He only saw an obstacle to his profit. He joked to his associates that the boy was probably trying to grow beans to climb to the giant's castle, not realizing that he was the giant and the beanstalk was already stronger than he knew. Vance represented everything that had destroyed Elias's family. The cold calculation of the powerful, the total disregard for the rhythm of the seasons, and the belief that money could replace the necessity of the earth. He began a campaign of harassment, sending inspectors to the roof nearly every week. They looked for code violations, fire hazards, anything to shut the operation down. They found nothing. Elias had built everything to last, with a precision that comes only from knowing your life depends on it. This only made Vance angrier. He started showing up personally, his expensive leather shoes clicking on the rooftop as he hovered over Elias. He would talk about progress and modernity, trying to convince the boy that his efforts were futile. He told him that one boy on a roof couldn't change the trajectory of a dying town. He laughed at the heirloom varieties Elias grew, strange, lumpy tomatoes and deep purple carrots, calling them mutants that no grocery store would ever buy. Vance believed that if you couldn't scale it, sell it, and discard it, it had no value. But Elias didn't bite. He would just keep working, his back to the man who represented his ruin. He would listen to the drone of the tycoon's voice and compare it to the buzzing of a fly. Annoying, but ultimately insignificant, compared to the ripening of the fruit. The tension between the two was a clash of civilizations. One lived by the clock and the dollar. The other lived by the sun and the soil. Vance began to realize that the boy wasn't just a nuisance. He was a symbol. As long as Elias was up there, the people in the street below had something to look at, besides their own feet. They started to gather on the sidewalk, pointing up at the green oasis. They started to ask Elias for advice on their own window box herbs. This terrified Vance. He knew that a hungry population was easy to control, but a population that felt a spark of hope was dangerous. He decided to double down on his efforts to crush the Rooftop farm, seeing it now as a direct threat to his authority. He wasn't just fighting a gardener. He was fighting the very idea that a person could be self-sufficient. The heat wave hit like a physical blow, a shimmering wall of air that turned the city into a furnace. Down in the streets, the asphalt grew soft enough to hold a footprint, and the power grid began to groan under the strain. This was the moment Vance chose to make his move. He arrived at the apartment building with a camera crew in tow, intending to humiliate Elias on the local news. He wanted to show the world the folly of the Rooftop farm. He climbed the stairs, his silk suit already darkened with sweat, and burst onto the roof. He found Elias kneeling in the dirt, his shirt soaked, his face smudged with dark earth. Vance laughed, a dry, sharp sound. He pulled a checkbook from his pocket and offered Elias a sum that seemed large to a poor boy, but was a pittance compared to the value of the land. He told Elias to take the money, leave the weeds to rot, and go find a job in one of his warehouses. When Elias refused without even looking up, Vance lost his composure. He kicked over a bucket of water Elias had spent hours hauling up. He mocked the boy's simple tools and the smell of the compost. He pointed at the wilting leaves of a nearby pepper plant and told the cameras that this was the face of failure. He called Elias a peasant in a penthouse, a boy who thought he was better than the system, but was actually just drowning in the dust of his own making. The mockery felt like a lash. Elias looked at the spilled water, the lifeblood of his garden soaking into the thirsty tar, and for a moment his resolve wavered. He felt the weight of the city's poverty and the tycoon's power pressing down on him. The neighbors were watching from the fire escapes, their faces unreadable, and Elias felt the sting of public shame. He looked like a fool, a boy playing in a sandbox while the world burned. But then he looked at his hands. They were the same hands as his father's and his grandfather's before him. They were stained with the earth, a stain that doesn't wash off with money or prestige. He stood up, towering over the shorter, softer man in the suit. He didn't shout. He didn't plead. He simply told Vance that the dirt didn't belong to him, and it never would. He told him that a man who doesn't know how to grow anything is the poorest man on earth. Vance sneered one last time, calling the boy delusional, and retreated to his air-conditioned car, convinced he had won. He left behind a mess of spilled water and a feeling of impending doom. The next few days were the hardest of Elias's life. The heat intensified, and the city's water supply was rationed. The municipal gardens in the park turned brown and died within 48 hours. The grocery store shelves began to empty as the corporate supply chains, already brittle, snapped under the pressure of the regional drought. People were getting hungry. They were getting scared. And on the roof, it looked like Elias's dream was dying with them. The plants were drooping, their leaves curling inward as if trying to hide from the sun. The mockery of the tycoon echoed in the hot wind. It seemed that arrogance had finally triumphed over the earth. Elias sat in the middle of his dying garden, the smell of dust and dry leaves thick in the air. He had reached his lowest point, the moment where the legacy of his family seemed destined to end in another foreclosure, another defeat at the hands of those who own everything and value nothing. He closed his eyes and felt the heat radiating from the roof, wondering if he had been a fool all along. But Elias had a secret, one that Vance's surveyors and the city's inspectors had completely overlooked. He hadn't just been planting seeds, he had been building an ecosystem. Deep beneath the surface of his raised beds, Elias had installed a hidden network of terracotta pipes and wool-lined reservoirs. This was an ancient technique, refined by his own ingenuity. While the city's pipes ran dry and the surface water evaporated, his system was holding on to every drop of moisture from a deep subterranean tank he'd built into the building's unused cooling tower. He had also been selective. He wasn't growing the thirsty, weak hybrids that the corporate farms favored. He was growing heirlooms, seeds that had survived 100 years of droughts and floods. These plants were warriors. As the moon rose, large and orange over the hazy horizon, the secret of the harvest began to reveal itself. While the rest of the town slept in the sweltering dark, Elias worked by the silver light. He opened the valves of his gravity-fed system, allowing the cool, stored water to seep directly into the roots. He used a mixture of fermented seaweed and bone meal he'd been aging for months, a nutrient-dense brew that smelled of the deep earth and the sea. Slowly, miraculously, the plants began to respond. The leaves didn't just perk up, they darkened to a deep, healthy emerald. The tomatoes, which had looked like shriveled hearts, began to swell until they were heavy and taut, their skins glowing like rubies. The corn, planted in deep tubs, stood tall and straight, their silk turning a rich chocolate brown. Elias's garden wasn't just surviving, it was thriving on the very heat that was killing everything else. He had used the thermal mass of the building itself to regulate the temperature of the soil. He had created a microclimate where the dew of the night was captured and funneled back into the earth. It was a masterpiece of hidden engineering and ancient wisdom. He spent the nights talking to the plants, a habit he'd picked up from his mother. He told them about the town below, about the hungry children and the tired parents. He told them they were the last line of defense, and the plants seemed to listen. By the time the sun began to peek over the jagged skyline, the rooftop was no longer a dusty experiment. It was a jungle. Vines of squash and melon crawled over the edges of the beds, their yellow flowers opening like trumpets to greet the dawn. The scent of basil and rosemary was so strong it drifted down to the street, a fragrant ghost in the stale city air. The people below began to notice. They looked up and saw not a shanty town, but a miracle. They saw a green crown on a gray head. Elias watched as the first rays of light hit his crop. He knew the turning point had arrived. The arrogance of the tycoon had been based on the belief that nature could be conquered and controlled. But Elias had shown that it could be partnered with. He hadn't fought the heat. He had used it. He hadn't cursed the concrete. He had made it the foundation for something better. The secret was out, and it was written in the vibrant colors of a harvest that shouldn't have been possible. He felt a sense of peace he hadn't known since he was a child on his grandfather's porch. The land had remembered him. It had seen his honest hands and his tireless work, and it was paying him back with a bounty that no bank could ever seize. The crisis in the city reached a breaking point. The trucks stopped coming. The supermarkets were shuttered, their glass windows cracked by the desperate. In the luxury towers, Sterling Vance found himself in a peculiar position. He had millions in the bank, but there was nothing to buy. His gold couldn't be eaten, and his stocks couldn't be boiled into a stew. He sat in his office, the air conditioning failing as the city's power continued to flicker, feeling the first real pangs of hunger he had ever known. That was when he heard the commotion from the street. He went to the window and saw a sight that defied his understanding. A line had formed around the block of the old tenement building. It wasn't a line of rioters or looters. It was a line of people holding baskets, bags, and aprons. And at the head of the line, coming down the fire escape, was Elias. He was carrying crates of produce so bright and heavy they looked like they had been forged in a different world. The harvest had come. Elias didn't sell the food. He didn't ask for a dime. He simply began to distribute it. He gave thick, juice-heavy tomatoes to the elderly women who lived on the second floor. He gave ears of sweet corn to the children who had been eating nothing but crackers for days. He gave bundles of kale and chives to the men who had spent their lives in the factories. The sky above Oak Haven seemed to turn gold, reflecting the sheer abundance of the rooftop. There was enough for everyone. The sheer volume of the harvest was impossible by any standard metric, a testament to what happens when you treat the earth as a mother instead of a mine. Vance watched through binoculars as the boy he had mocked became the savior of the neighborhood. He saw the way the people looked at Elias, not with the fearful respect they gave a tycoon, but with the genuine love they gave a provider. Vance realized, with a sickening clarity, that his new vista was dead. He could tear down the building, but he couldn't tear down what Elias had done. He had proven that the people didn't need the tycoons to survive. They just needed the dirt and the will to work it. Desperate and humbled by his own stomach, Vance finally descended from his tower. He walked through the crowd, his suit now rumpled and dusty, and stood at the back of the line. When he finally reached the front, Elias looked at him. There was no malice in the boy's eyes, only a quiet, weathered wisdom. Elias didn't bring up the mockery or the bucket of spilled water. He simply reached into a crate and handed Vance a single perfect apple, an heirloom variety, with a skin like polished mahogany. Vance took it, his hands shaking. He bit into it, and for the first time in his life, he tasted the truth. He tasted the sun, the rain, and the grit of the soil. He realized that all his towers were just stacks of stone, and that real wealth isn't something you can store in a vault. It's something you grow, one seed at a time, with a pair of honest hands and a heart that doesn't know how to quit. The town was no longer dying. It was being reborn, fed by a boy who refused to believe that the concrete was the end of the story. The Rooftop farm still stands today, but it's no longer alone. Greenery has begun to spread from balcony to balcony, a slow-moving tide of life that is reclaiming the gray heart of Oak Haven. Elias proved that resilience isn't just about surviving the storm. It's about knowing how to dance in the rain and how to find the water when the sky turns to brass. He showed us that the land never truly forgets a person who treats it with respect. Whether it's a 1,000-acre spread in the valley or a few pallets of dirt on a city roof, the earth responds to the soul, not the status. The tycoon's towers were never built, and the town found its way back to its roots by looking up instead of down. It's a reminder to all of us who have ever felt like the underdog. Your value isn't determined by those who want to pave over your dreams. Your value is grown in the quiet, in the dirt, and in the steady rhythm of the seasons. Keep your hands dirty and your heart hopeful. This is Beyond the Fields, where we know that the greatest harvests are the ones they said could never grow.